I messed up. So I told her, you got a mirror, you can see what you look like in those jeans.
Oh.
So anyway, I don't know what to do.
You just talk to her.
And tell her what?
You tell her how you feel.
I did. I told her, I feel like you look like your mother.
Okay, no, you need to use your words. You know, romantic words.
Oh. Wait, what?
Okay, honey, you take your wife by her hands and you just pour into her.
Wait. Am I holding her hands or am I pouring something? I can't do both.
What? No. Todd, you are going to pour words into your wife. You look her in the eyes, dead set, and you just let go. Because that's what she does to you, Todd. She makes you let go. And you say to her, you mean everything to me. And I would let go of everything if it means that I just get to hold you for the rest of my life. And that's what you do. What are you doing?
I'm calling my wife, and you are gonna tell me some pretty words to say to her.
We are not doing this.
Hey, babe. No, don't hang up, don't hang up. I was an idiot, and I know you said some things too. You shouldn't have.
You don't say that.
That's what I meant. I meant I have some things to say to you right now.
No.
While we're on the phone.
Stop it.
Just listen. She said I have 2 minutes. What do I say? What do I say?
I'm sorry.
For what?
No, you tell her that.
I'm sorry. Babe? She's still there. I can hear her breathing.
Tell her I love you and you mean everything to me, and I am a fool because I don't tell you that more often.
I'm a fool for loving you, and I should say that stuff more often.
You were the only reason I am half the man I am. Your love and constant support is my daily breath.
I'm half the man I am because of you, and your love is a constraint.
Constant support.
No, no, your love is constantly on my breath, daily.
You are the greatest blessing God has ever given me, and you are perfect for me.
Babe, you're the best thing God ever did for me. You're perfect. For me, you're perfect. You're not perfect.
What are you doing? Just tell me what to say. Sunsets are more beautiful when you are on the horizon.
You're more beautiful at sunset on the horizon. It totally worked. Babe, I'm gone in 60 seconds.
What a moron.
You were great.
I know, right?
The words you said, I heard. I had no idea.
Seriously? You had no idea that some women fall for that stuff? I'm just glad you're not that gullible. By the way, what's for dinner? I've messed up.
Use your words, my friend. Use those words.
The following story may or may not have actually happened. My wife Elizabeth walks through the front door, home from work one evening, a little bit later than usual, I knew that she was going to have to work late on that day, so I take it upon myself to get supper ready. As she hung up her coat and kicked off her shoes, I asked her how her day had gone. "Well," she replied, "it was a pretty good day. I found out today that the project that I've been working on has been extended by a few more months, which is a good thing because I still have some documents that I need to get signed, and I've been having a hard time getting the project manager to actually look over the work and sign them. I think sometimes he ignores my emails because I'm a woman. You know, women have done so much to equal the playing field in the workplace. We fought for so many years for equality, and it seems like yet there's still so much more work that has to be done. You know, a lot of men think that women should be relegated to work at home, you know, things like cooking and cleaning and laundry. We're out of laundry detergent. I think I'll go over to Walmart after supper and pick some more up. Silas has baseball practice at 6:30. I'll drop him off on the way. Actually, you should probably go with us because Alex's parents, the Johnsons, are going to be there, and Silas has been spending a lot of time with Alex lately, and it would be really good for us to spend some time with his parents and get to know them a little bit better. Supper really smells good. What are we having?" Now, some of you were tracking perfectly well with that entire conversation, and others of you are completely confused about how we ended up in a conversation that started about how was your day, and we ended up in a discussion about women's equality in the workplace, laundry detergent, and baseball practice. It is no mystery that men and women don't necessarily always communicate the same way. We don't always think the same way. We don't process things the same way. And while we might see it as a great mystery, I tend to believe that it is somehow all a part of God's grand plan in putting men and women together in the context of relationships. Now, before we get too far into our message today, I do want to kind of throw this out here. I know that not everyone here is married. Not everyone will be married. Some of you have been there, done that. You got the scars to prove it, and you don't plan to go back and do it again. But what we're going to look at over the course of this series is we're going to be looking at the differences between men and women. And so if you're a man, there is no doubt that you have women in your life. You probably have a mom. And hopefully some of the insight that you'll get through the course of this series will help you understand your mom a little bit better. Many of you might have coworkers of the opposing gender. You have neighbors, you have people that you interact with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, what have you. And hopefully through the course of this series, Waffles and Spaghetti, you will gain a little bit more insight into the communication styles and the way that the opposing gender thinks and operates, and it will help you throughout your daily life. Now, it's no secret that there are huge differences between men and women, and I think a lot of these differences started from the very beginning. The first book in the Bible, which is called Genesis, gives us a play-by-play of God's creation of the heavens and the earth and humanity. And one of the things that you might note as you read the first chapter of the first book of the Bible, Genesis, is that God spoke everything into existence. He said, "Let there be light," and there was light. He said, "Let the waters teem with fish, and let the birds fill the sky." And there were fish, and there were birds. He spoke those things into existence. But then God turned his attention to the crown jewel of his creation, mankind. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, God said, "Let us make human beings in our image, to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground." So God created human beings in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. In the case of people, God didn't just speak humanity into existence. God created. Everything about men and women was made on purpose, for purpose. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, the text tells us that the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground. He breathed the breath of life into the man's nostrils, and the man became a living person. If we skip down to verse 21 of that same chapter, it says that the Lord God caused that man to fall into a deep sleep. And when the man slept, the Lord God took out one of the man's ribs and closed up the opening. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib, and he brought her to the man. And this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. From the very beginning of time, God's plan was to create two genders, two types of people, male and female, separate but equal, different but compatible. Even from the way God constructed men and women, we see that there is a difference. Man was made from the dirt, go figure. And women, well, the woman was made from harvested body parts of the man. From the story that we read of the very first two humans, the first man, the first woman, we call them Adam and Eve, we can see very clearly that they operate and interact differently from one another. The way that they relate to life, the way that they relate to God, the way that they manage the circumstances that face them, they do it all differently. Now, while the differences that we face between men and women might create some real challenges and some real obstacles for us in our relationships, they can also be the source, those differences can be the source of some of the most fulfilling aspects of our lives together, particularly as husbands and wives. The key to finding the fulfillment that we're looking for in the differences that we have is not necessarily learning to understand one another, because let's just face it, men will never understand women, okay? That's a fact. It's not in the Bible, but it should be. Men will never understand women. So we're not talking about understanding one another. What we are talking about here, though, is learning to appreciate what is different about one another. We need to learn to appreciate the differences. The title of our new series, Waffles and Spaghetti, was inspired by the best-selling book called Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti. It was written by Bill and Pam Farrell. The Farrells are well-known Christian counselors. They have written about and spoken on the topic of marriage and marriage relationships for many years. Now today what we're going to do is just kind of get an overview of this concept of waffles and spaghetti. We're not going to get real practical today. However, the remaining 5 weeks of this series, we're going to get really practical. We're going to get down to nuts and bolts about how waffles and spaghetti work together in the context of a healthy relationship. We're going to talk about waffles and spaghetti in the context of communication and conflict. We'll talk about waffles and spaghetti in financial management. We'll talk about waffles and spaghetti in parenting. And we're going to talk about waffles and spaghetti in the bedroom. Not the kind that you eat. I'm not promoting eating waffles and spaghetti in the bedroom. Okay, all areas of our married lives are going to be implicated by the fact that we are different. We're different than one another. And again, a lot of these differences can create stresses, but a lot of these differences can also bring us together in ways that make our marriages more fulfilling, and in the long run, they can actually be healthier relationships. Waffles and spaghetti. I know it's a little bit of a corny angle, might seem a little silly, but I chose to go with this angle because I think that men get it. Now, I know that we did a lot of advertising in the community for this series, and most people probably saw our postcards and our billboard and assumed it was just a new restaurant opening up in Medicine Hat that served waffles and spaghetti. I'm not really quite sure, but I guarantee you guys, you saw a postcard or a billboard with waffles and spaghetti on it. It got your attention, right? Because food gets our attention. I really toyed with the idea of calling this series chips and salsa. I just could not find a way to accurately portray men and women as chips and salsa. So I stuck with the waffles and spaghetti theme. Now, when we talk about men being like waffles, I don't mean that men waffle in their decision making, that they're unstable. What I mean is that men process life in boxes. You know, if you take a look at this fine Eggo waffle, the beautiful Eggo, what we see is a collection of little boxes. Each one is separate from all the others. And, you know, when we put it on our plate, we pour our syrup into it. We want to make sure that every little square gets a little bit of syrup in it, right? There's little walls between each little cube, and they each have their own individual space. Every little box is its own unique holding place on the waffle. And this is typically how men process life. Men process life in little boxes, little isolated places with walls around each compartment. Our thinking and our processing is divided up into little boxes, and each box contains one issue and only one issue. There's no overlap between the boxes. Each box is unique to itself. Okay? Men tend to live in one box at a time. When I'm at work, I'm in my work box. When I am playing golf, I'm in my golf box. When I'm watching a movie or watching television, I'm in my watch the movie or watch the television show box. Have you ever noticed, ladies, how a man can be watching a sporting event or something interesting on television, and it doesn't seem to matter what else is going on around him, his focus is dialed in beautifully to that television, right? I know I'm guilty of this sometimes. I can get glued to a sporting event. The kids are fighting, projectiles are being hurled across the room, but I never look up from the television. Or how often do we know that the guy's glued to the TV, he's in his trance-like state, and the smoke alarm starts going off in the house. The house is burning down around him, literally, yet he's still glued to the television. Or you put on your honeymoon nightie, ladies, and you dance around the living room, and he reaches for the remote control to turn the volume up, right? This happens because men get into that box, and we're focused on that one thing and that one thing only. The technical scientific term for this phenomenon is called compartmentalization. Compartmentalization. That is, we put all of life and responsibilities into different compartments. Each one has its own little square, its own little space. Now, the most significant way that this plays out in men is that men tend to be problem solvers. That tends to be the way that we operate when we are living our lives like the waffle. We enter the box, we size up the situation, we want to look for how to solve the problem in that box. And we go right to the root issue of whatever there is in that box. We get into the box, we size up the problem, the challenge, and then we formulate a solution for whatever is happening in that box. If we're in our career box, we go in, we look for the things that we need to do to be successful in our career. If we need a car repair done or a home renovation, we get into the box that is the car repair or the home reno, and we solve the problem, and we focus on nothing more than what we see happening in that box. Men do the same thing when it comes to communication. We get into a conversation, and the first thing that we're looking for is, how do I solve the problem? What is the solution? What's the challenge here? What do I need to solve? Because I'm looking for a way to solve the problem in the communication box, and then to get out of that box and to get into another box. Men will typically strategically organize their lives so that they spend more time in the boxes in which they have success and tend to avoid the boxes where they tend to have less success. Does that make sense? This is why men tend to get stuck in hobbies, right? We find something we're good at, something we can be successful at, and then we focus our time and our energy on those things that we can be successful at. Intuitively, men will avoid the boxes in which we don't feel like we can have success. If we can't be effective, if we can't solve the problem, we avoid the box altogether. Women like to use the phrase or the term avoidance to describe the things that we avoid. This is a phenomenon. It is an actual thing. Men have boxes, some in which they could be successful, some they feel successful in, they gravitate towards those. Other boxes where we don't feel as successful, and we will stay far away from those boxes. If you're paying close attention, ladies, you will see that the man that is in your life will spend most of his time in the areas where he seems to feel like he can be the most successful. Now, this is a very tricky phenomenon when it comes to the greatest marital issue that most of us face outside of finances, which is communication. Because if a man does not believe he can be successful in the context of a conversation, he will just avoid the conversation, right? If his ultimate goal is to solve the problem, to get to the root issue and solve the problem, and he doesn't feel like he can get to the root issue and solve the problem, he will just avoid the conversation altogether. If he finds it pointless, if he finds it impossible, then he will just clam up. And this is why men say such brilliant things in the middle of your conversation, such as, can you just get to the point? Or, is there really any point to this conversation? The point that he's looking for is he's looking for you to spell out what the problem is so that he can formulate a plan to solve the problem, because men by nature are problem solvers. these statements that men make, get to the point, will you? Can you just stop boring me with all the details and get to the point? Is really just it's spoken out of frustration because he doesn't know how to make the conversation work. Because if the conversation isn't resulting in a problem being solved, he doesn't know where to go with it. The need for success in a box is why men become obsessive with things. Men become obsessive with things like playing golf or fishing or tinkering in the garage or doing yard work. These things become all-consuming for a man because he can get in that box and he can size up the problem. And then he can focus all of his energies on solving the problem and he can experience success. And when he experiences success in that box, that's the box where he wants to live. The bottom line is that men, as they feel better about themselves in solving problems, they will spend the bulk of their time, energy, and mental effort in the places where they feel like they can be the most efficient. However, they will avoid the places where they feel the most deficient. Now, in contrast to the compartmentalized waffle world of a man, women tend to approach life more like a plate of spaghetti. Okay? And we look at a plate of spaghetti, and one of the first things that we notice, of course, is that there are noodles all over this plate going in all different directions, and all of these noodles are sort of overlapped and intertwined with each other, right? If you attempted to follow one strand of pasta, you would find that it intersects and it overlaps and it touches all the other pieces of pasta. Everything is all intertwined and connected. This is typically the way a woman will process life and relationships. Okay? Every thought, every issue, every relational connection is connected to every other thought and every other issue and every other relational issue in some way, shape, or form. Where men tend to approach life more like a project, get in, win, get out, women tend to approach life more like a process. This is more of a project. Get in the box, get out of the box. Women, get on the plate, and some way, somehow, it's all connected. It all works together, and it all makes sense to you. Women, as a result, most often tend to be better multitaskers than men because men tend to focus in a box. This is not concretely true because my wife, while I know that she does operate this way, such as that conversation that I shared with you at the beginning of our time together where we linked together laundry, soap, women's equality in the workplace, and baseball practice, she's not a real good multitasker, primarily because she's ADD. So we don't factor in neurological issues such as attention deficit disorder, because if you got that and you're living like this, you're going to have a hard time multitasking. Meanwhile, other men who tend to be more ADD can multitask better in a boxy world because of their ADD. So see, being ADD can be a benefit to those of you who have ADD. Women tend to solve problems from very different perspectives than men. Their pursuit of success in life is really built around the idea of being able to connect all of the strands together. Where a man wants to get into the box and get to the bottom line and solve the problem so he can get on to the next box, women feel more successful when they have had the ability to intertwine the different aspects and the different facets of their lives. For men, we look at this and we see it as random and completely disjointed. But for a woman, it's very natural to see the links between these things. It's natural to see the link in the conversation between women's equality in the workplace and laundry detergent and baseball practice. These things make sense. This key difference between men and women is often one of the greatest sources of stress in a marriage relationship. You know, while she's making all these connections and linking multiple choices and multiple topics all together, he's frantically jumping around from one box to another trying to keep up in the conversation. Pretty soon his eyes roll back in his head, drool's coming out of the corner of his mouth, and smoke's coming out of his ears because he can't keep up. There's too much, and so what happens is he tunes out, right? And I'm sure none of you have ever really experienced that. Of course you have. You experience that all the time, ladies. When you're in a conversation with your man, you look at the 1,000-yard stare in his eyes and you realize he's completely checked out and has no idea what I just said. And it's not that he's checked out, but it's that he's lost, jumping from box to box, trying to keep up and try to figure out where you are. In the end, she feels a whole lot better because she's been able to express all of these things and link all these things together, whereas he feels like a dump truck just ran over his head. That's literally what a guy feels like when he's had to navigate this. Another characteristic that creates complexity in marriage and our interactions with one another is the fact that most men have boxes in their waffle that have no words in them. For a woman, that's almost impossible to imagine. That we could actually have thoughts and experiences and emotions with no words. And so oftentimes a guy will go into a box where he's reminiscing or processing some emotion, some pleasant experience, some time in life that brings back fond memories, but he doesn't really have any words to use to communicate those emotions and those feelings associated with that box. The end result is that the woman will often feel left out. She doesn't feel like she can relate to him because he hasn't been able to articulate the experience or the emotions that he is experiencing in that box in a way that brings her into it. The things get even more complex when we understand that there are also boxes in an average man's life that not only have no words, but boxes that have no thoughts. These are empty boxes where there's literally nothing. And oftentimes a man will retreat to those empty boxes as a place for refreshment and rejuvenation and relaxation. And of course, it's when he's gone into one of those empty boxes and he's parked that his wife will see this as the greatest opportunity to engage in a conversation. So she sees his blank stare, sees how relaxed he is, and says, "Honey, what are you thinking?" And now all of a sudden, he's in panic mode because he can't say nothing because nothing, well, that's not believable for her. And so she'll think that he's hiding something. And so immediately he goes into this panic mode and he's looking for the nearest box that might actually have thoughts and words in it so that he can begin to communicate something, and he starts to stutter and stammer about what he's thinking about, which wasn't really what he was thinking about. And now she really thinks that he's lying because he can't articulate it. She thinks that he's hiding something. Well, he is hiding something. He's hiding the fact that he was in an empty box. No thoughts, no words. It was a good place for him until she came along and asked him to have a conversation. These differences between men and women, our differences are certainly not limited to conversation. There's a lot of research that actually supports the notion that men and women process a lot of things differently. We process our emotions differently. We learn differently. We make decisions differently. We problem solve differently. And yet, as part of God's great design, men and women are made to complement one another. These two things that you would never imagine putting on a plate together, waffles and spaghetti, were designed by God to fit together, to work together, to come together as one and live not just getting along, but actually to live a life together that's wholly satisfying and fulfilling and purpose-filled. Studies show that when we look at men and women's brains side by side scientifically, that a man's brain is typically 10% larger than a woman's brain. We like that, don't we? But then again, we have to have 10% more brain because we have so many empty boxes, right? It's 10% bigger, but the 10% that's bigger is probably empty. Women's brains actually have sections of them when compared to a man's brain that actually have more nerve cells and more electrical activity in them, which explains why women have so many more words to say than men have, right? Women are more likely to use both sides of their brain when they problem solve. Okay, so you have your right side of your brain, which is the creative side, left side of the brain, which is the logical, analytical side. When women solve problems, they will tend to use both sides. They will apply both logic and also creativity. Men, on the other hand, tend to look at most problems as one or the other. I either need to solve this creatively or I need to solve it analytically. This is not always the case, but it is most often the case. It is the typical way that men solve problems. And this actually validates the fact that men are actually better at solving three-dimensional puzzles. This is kind of interesting. Men are better at solving three-dimensional puzzles than women, and this plays itself out naturally in the fact that a man is typically a better navigator than a woman. A man can read a map or can find his way out of a lost situation typically better than a woman can. In the book that the Farrells wrote, they included a list of ways that men and women approach life differently. I want to share some of these differences with you, and you can just kind of go along the list and process whether you think these are true about you and your spouse, okay? See how many of them actually apply in your relationship. Men are more aggressive than women when they drive sports cars and light trucks. Think about that for a second, okay? When men get a sports car or a light truck, they tend to be more aggressive. However, interestingly, women tend to be more aggressive drivers when they're driving an SUV or a luxury car, okay? Most people believe that men are safer drivers than women. Would you all agree with that? No, the women don't. I think most of the people they surveyed must have been men. Because men, we believe that we're safer drivers than women, don't we? Agreed? Tim, your wife has left the room. You can agree with me. Okay, yeah, she's gone. All right. Most people believe that women, actually, this is not just what people believe. This is actually scientifically proven. Women are less likely to be caught speeding. If you compared your photo radar records with your spouse, guys, we tend to get more of the photo radar tickets. Men are willing to take greater financial risks than women. Women make safer choices when it comes to lifestyle. Fewer women smoke. Men tend to be riskier when it comes to smoking. Women tend to be more careful when it comes to wearing a seatbelt. Women tend to be more careful or more cautious when it comes to seeing a doctor on a regular basis and having checkups or having their blood pressure taken, right? Guys, we tend to avoid those things. Women tend to gravitate towards them. Women tend to exercise better dental hygiene. Go figure. It is true. In my house, we call Mama the teeth-brushing Nazi. She has convinced my children that they will die in their sleep if they do not brush their teeth before they go to bed at night. I'm not joking. You can ask my sons. It is the one thing that my wife harps on more than anything else. Brush your teeth, brush your teeth. They won't die if they don't brush their teeth once in a while. Guys, everybody with me on that? Okay, all right. Men tend to interrupt more conversations than women. Find that interesting? I guess it's because when we feel like we have something to say, we need to say it now before we forget, before we go back into the empty box. Women do tend to ask more questions. These are some of the differences, some of the scientifically proven differences between men and women in the way that we relate to one another, the way that we think, the way that we process, the way that we troubleshoot and problem solve. Now, over the next 5 weeks, we're going to get very practical in each one of the topics that we're going to cover. We're going to look at some very practical tips, and I'm going to coach you on how you can make your spaghetti and your waffles work better in the context of different areas of your relationship. My goal is ultimately to help you learn to appreciate what is different about you than your spouse. We know that we're different. We know we think differently. We know that we process things differently. But men, when your wife needs to use many words and connects lots of things, and we feel like we're going to have a brain implosion, we're going to learn to appreciate that about her. And ladies, when your man has no words to put to his thoughts or his feelings, and he can't articulate that, instead of getting mad about it, we're going to try to learn to appreciate those things. Now, one of the things that's really important to me, and I hope that you're willing to do this, as we engage in this journey together, is that we bring a sense of humor to the table, right? It's really important for us to be able to laugh about our differences and to laugh about ourselves and the way that we process things. You know, one of the best ways to break the tension that often exists in our relationships is to be able to laugh about our differences. And I hope that by the end of the course of this series, you will actually be glad that he's a waffle and you're spaghetti, or that you're a waffle and she's spaghetti. Now, I'm going to wrap things up right now, and I'm going to give you a little quiz, okay? I've debated on whether or not we ought to have the answer discussed here in this room, or whether you should just take this quiz with you and discuss it with your spouse on the way home. I'll kind of leave that up to you. We're going to roll a little video that, again, I think will, it'll be helpful for us men in just a moment. And so I'm going to give you the quiz, and we're going to watch the video, and then I will pray to dismiss us. Here's the quiz. John and Betty must leave their home by 6 p.m. in order to arrive at a dinner party on time. John starts getting ready at 5:55 p.m. so that he can be ready to leave at 6. 5 minutes. Got it? What time does Betty need to start getting ready in order to leave by 6 p.m.? Keep your answers to yourselves. Let's enjoy this video.
I did the choreography myself. Hey honey, have you gained some weight in your rear end? The dress you wear reminds me of my old girlfriend. And where'd you get those shoes? I think they're pretty lame. Would you stop talking, cause I'm trying to watch the game? If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. I planned a hunting trip next week on your birthday. I didn't ask you, but I knew it'd be okay. Go make some dinner while I watch this fishing show. I taped it over our old wedding video. If you're a man who've done that, a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to you. Solo. Okay. Your cooking is okay, but not like Mother makes. The diamond in the ring I bought you is a fake. Your eyes look puffy, dear. Are you feeling ill? Happy anniversary, I bought you a treadmill. If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, that too. These are the things you don't say to your lady. If you're a man who doesn't want to get killed with a knife, these are the things you don't say to your lady.